Today in the world, you may be too young to remember this, but the discourse, the communication that's going on is just atrocious. When I grew up in America, it wasn't okay to shame someone else, to demean someone else. It just wasn't acceptable. You know, I remember, some of you might be too young to remember this, but Hillary came out with a book called It Takes a Village. So the Republicans were up in arms and said, you want big government. And Hillary was, no, it takes a village. You see, both of them thought it was not in good taste to shame the other person. They didn't personally say, oh, Hillary, you're a this, or they were speaking about ideas. Whenever people shame you, whenever people criticize a group, let's say anti-Semitism, or even if you want to criticize conservatives, oh, conservatives are crazy, or even to say liberals, oh, liberals, they're mad as a hat. Whenever you do that, you've stepped beyond the pale of a conversation. What you're doing is you're taking a group of people and you're not communicating to them, you're communicating about them. You know, for Hitler to get the Germans to murder Jews, he had to first make them think that Jews are not people. Now, the Jews were just as German as the Germans. In fact, they might have been even more German. They were so proud of the fatherland. I don't want to go into all details, but Jews in every country are very valuable citizens of that country. So the first thing he had to do was to categorize them as being other, as a group. The way I see it, I'm just being genuine, is that Obama brought into America hate speech. If you want to communicate to somebody, I don't know, say I'm a Jew and I believe that the whole land of Israel belongs to the Jews, and you have a different opinion, I'm happy to talk to you. But if you're here and you're shouting at me, that means you're not communicating. You don't want a conversation. It's a form of abuse. And I've become very, very sensitive, and I especially encourage the young people to become sensitive to this. What Hitler did is he made people believe that other people are evil. And once you believe that, then you have the right to demean them, to kill them, because that person's an evil. In fact, you're doing good. In Nazi Germany, you were praised for killing a Jew and many, many other good people, and you were put in prison for killing a cat. That was the law of the land. The same thing is happening in, so to say, the Palestinian territories. And I want to address something. Black Lives Matter. Is that a movement which is for blacks, or is it against whites? Now, I'm very, very knowledgeable about this because I lived for over 14 years in South Africa. And it's very much a country that's it was a racist country, and then it became a multicultural country. Now, there's a very big difference between a leader like Nelson Mandela, who he didn't hate whites. He was for the benefit of all people. He wanted it to be good for everyone. In fact, it's beautiful. He created a rainbow nation. That's the notion of the black South Africa and the entire South Africa, that we're in it together. When Martin Luther King came, he didn't say, I have a dream where blacks are going to kill whites. He said, I have a dream where black children and white children play together. This idea reminds me of Mugabe. Mugabe took over Zimbabwe, and I don't know if the white government was racist. Let's call them a racist government. But he didn't embark on a campaign that was good for all people. As we speak now, he destroyed the breadbasket of Africa because he was focused on hate, not on love. One of the wisest Jewish mystics, his name was Reb Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. He said, what is the difference between somebody who loves truth or hates falsehood? Seems similar. Think about this. What's the difference between someone who loves love or hates hate? The former will find truth and he will find love because that's what he's looking for. That's what he loves. The latter will find falsehood and will find hate. People who themselves unfortunately have been abused or are angry or are jealous, this is really the bully mentality, they're not looking to make the world a better place. They're looking to destroy good people. This is why for 4,000 years, Jews ostensibly, from the perspective of charity and nobility, were probably the best people in the world. And they've been harassed and targeted and murdered. You know, one great-grandmother of mine was murdered by the Nazis. 3 of my great-grandparents were murdered by the communists just for being Jews. So Americans today, and particularly white Americans, are being attacked, not because they're bad, but because they're good. And there is jealousy of goodness. One of the great Jewish mystics, his name was Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, and he said, 2 people are walking down the street. One is carrying a sack of straw and grass, and the other is carrying a sack of diamonds, rubies, and gold coins. Who do you think is more likely to get attacked? You see, when there is love in your heart, which this love really comes from the notion that you are good. And this notion really comes from the Bible, because the Bible starts off with the idea that man is created in the image of God. The founding fathers of America believed that humans have divinely endowed rights, meaning the reason that you're valuable is not because you earn more money or you're a movie star, but because you were created by God. That itself gives you all the value you will ever need. You are the most precious thing that God made. In the Bible, the whole world leads up to what? The creation of man. That's where creation ends. So it gives dignity to the individual. So when I feel good about myself, I also feel good about you. But unfortunately, there are many people, tragically, who have been demeaned, who have been shamed, and they believe about themselves negatively that they are bad and evil. And then what happens is they become jealous of people who have a positive identity. And so we have to be so careful whenever you see something in the news or from a politician. If the general thrust is something positive, embrace it, go for it. But if the thrust is something negative, that somebody is evil, get rid of it. Because if you take that into your heart, what's stopping you from becoming a Nazi? You know, the Arabs aren't naturally evil, and yet they've been told by their leaders, and most of them are happy to kill Jews. We have Pew polls which show a large percentage of the young generation of Muslims, unfortunately, feel that suicide, which is really homicide, bombing, is okay. It's justified. It's unbelievable. So the question can be asked, and this is the message. So when is it okay to protest, and how is it okay to protest? The answer is very, very, very important. When we're young, we're naive. They say, and I can say this happened to me, if you're not a liberal by the time you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 30, you have no head. If we love people, we're not capable of seeing anything evil. You know, as a father, if you told me there's something wrong with my child, I can't hear it because I love my child. But if, God forbid, we hate someone, we're in the exact opposite. We can't hear anything good about them. It's like Churchill said, a fanatic is someone who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. Whenever somebody's harping in, really, you know, I just saw this. One of the great advocates for Israel is a very well-known Harvard law professor by the name of Alan Dershowitz. And so there's this whole ridiculous movement called the BDS. It's basically about boycotting Israel. And so he was invited to Oxford, I think it's called Debate Society. It's the most prestigious debate society, or as well as the first one, I believe, in the world. And all his good friends said, don't go there because the BDS comes from Oxford. There's no way you're going to win an argument in Oxford. Anyway, he says, I like a challenge, and he went to Oxford. So first of all, the 2 highest in the BDS were cowards. They wouldn't debate him. So I guess it was the third, or an English person came to debate him. So he said like this. He said to the young people, does the BDS, boycott Israel, okay, let's say Israel is doing crimes against humanity, does it apply also to Syria? Syria's murdered 400,000 people? No. Does the BDS go to Saudi Arabia that doesn't allow women to drive and so many atrocities? No. So you're telling me the only country that has BDS is Israel? Yes. Okay. So he said that is racism. Because if you don't apply the same standard to someone else, that means you're targeting this person. You don't care about the benefit of the Palestinians. You can't stand Israel existing. That's your issue. And he said the BDS wasn't created to help Palestinians. In fact, it hurts them because it takes away jobs for the Palestinians in Yehuda v'Shomron, in the territories that they're, so to say, occupied, which is really part of Israel. The bottom line is, and this is how he won the debate, he said, it's amazing, he said, tell me, can you name a single country in the world that, faced with the same threats of annihilation, does more to protect the lives of its enemies? One of the generals, I forget his name, I think it's Robert Kemp, a general from England, he said that there's no country, including the US, I'm a proud American, but when you go to war, civilians die, and it's about 4-1. When Israel goes to war, it's about 2-1. There's no country in the world that protects the Arab lives more than Israel does. And nobody could name a country faced with the same threats that protects the lives of their enemies more than Israel does. So in other words, this whole movement is not for the Palestinians. The Arabs don't care about the Palestinians. They are the ones that created the refugee problem. There's no other group in the world that's been refugees for 60 years. They have so much land and wealth. They can take all these people and they keep these. It's actually, I feel very bad for these Palestinians. They keep them as a no-man kind of thing. They don't give them citizenships. It's disgusting what they're doing. And it's all because there's this deep-seated hatred and jealousy of the Jewish people. In fact, I met a former PLO terrorist who converted to Christianity. He's written a book, you can get it online, called The Mind of Terror. Also, once an Arafat man. Anyway, I don't want to speak negatively about the Arabs or anything, but I do want to say is that he wrote a doctoral thesis that there's a 4,000-year jealousy, like a sibling rivalry of the Arabs that come from Yishmael, and unfortunately they were kicked out of the house, and they have a very great anger and resentment against the Jewish people. And so therefore we have to understand that anger and resentment is not a conversation. Just like love can see no evil, evil can see no love. When somebody says, okay, so if the Jewish people are so bad, is there some good? If you can't see any good in someone, this is a very interesting thing. The first legal system is Judaism. And Judaism had a Supreme Court of 71 judges. And they had capital punishments. There was a lower court of 23 judges. And this is very, very interesting. If all 71 judges or all 23 judges say that this person is a murderer, he's not put to death. Why? 23 judges, rabbis, scholars say this guy murdered. Because if there's not one person that can see anything good in this person, it means that there's something wrong with this court. The court that defines another group as completely evil, they are not coming from a point of looking for truth. They're coming for looking for destruction. And once you grow up and you become mature, you realize that these two things are natural to humans. Some of us, thank God, have love in our hearts and therefore are naive and we wish to love and we don't want to see evil. And some of us, unfortunately, have been abused and are resentful, and we have hate in our hearts, and we just want to destroy. You know, I'm going to share a story. It's a personal story, but I feel the subject is very, very important. I was the rabbi of a community. I don't want to go into all the details, but eventually a bully became the chairman of the board, and one of the things he was harassing me about was I wasn't kind enough to people who had counseling people, things like that. Fine. So I was quite naive. At that time, I was actually very naive. I didn't know there was bad in the world. So I took him seriously, and I went on a specific course to become a better counselor. It was a very great course. I think I benefited from it. So I came back, and I told him, I was in this country, and I took this course. And he didn't say, oh, that's great, now you're going to be a better counselor. He said, he says, I think I should take that course. You see, behind him, and I was a chaplain in the Boy Scouts of America, and a priest who did research on this told me this. What breaks up communities is ego. You get somebody who's a narcissistic personality disorder, who's a megalomaniac, and he wants all the attention. The whole world has to be about me. And he can't handle anybody else having any kind of recognition. And therefore his mind shows him other people's evil, and he is not looking to fix the situation. This individual didn't want me to be a better counselor. He was looking for more attention. He was looking to get me out of... In fact, eventually he did get me out of that synagogue. That's how bad it was. I had to leave because it just wasn't safe enough. Because it's a madness. So when you're mature, how do you deal with these things? And I'm going to conclude with a story. I have a friend, and I recently heard the story. His name is Rabbi Avtzin. He's the Chabad rabbi to Hong Kong. He was invited to Malaysia, and the president, a Muslim president of Malaysia, I think he's since passed on, you can look this up, I forget his name, but he was very much into peace, that Islam is not here to kill the world, but is here to be part of the world. And his movement, which has 60 million Muslims in the movement, they believe that they have to protect minorities, and God bless them, and there should be more Muslims, and I'm sure there are like them. And so this group invited this rabbi to come speak to them. So he came to speak a few hundred Muslims, and he spoke to them that Judaism believes that there's a place for everybody. God wants us all to increase in our goodness and kindness, which will obviously make the world a good and kind place. Because we are the world. And if I am a better person, you're a better person, the world's a better place. And that was basically his message to them. So one of the people raised their hand and said, what do I do if from my own family they're becoming radicalized and they're just about destruction? So it's very difficult. From your own family, let's say a brother, you want to increase the goodness and kindness in the world, make people safe and protect minorities, and they want to kill people. What do you do? And so he said a very, very profound, and it's not a simple thing to do, but it's the only thing you can do. He says, your actions have to be louder than their words. So he said, their words are very, very loud. So he said, then make sure you do 10 times the amount of good as their loud speech. And by us all understanding that the world really is a beautiful place. People are beautiful. It's only when there's resentment and jealousy and hate that people, they just go crazy. Just like love has no rationality, hate has no rationality. But you are a rational person. And therefore, by increasing in your love, now it doesn't mean to get abused. You just step away from this conversation. You can't have a conversation with somebody who's not conversing with you. There's no point of a conversation. You have to live your life in a positive way. Obviously, if you have the ability to protect the country, you must protect it. If, God forbid, you had to kill a murderer to prevent murder, as the Talmud said, mercy to terrorism is terrorism to mercy. That's appropriate, but you're not in the government. It's not your role to do that, so you can't do that. So your role and my role is to not ever, God forbid, hate, not allow somebody to demean you, and always increase in your goodness and kindness. Thanks so much.